Hi, welcome to the November 2nd, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test to make sure everything is kind of sounding as expected here. Let me just play a little bit of music. And I'll just listen on my monitoring computer. Welcome to the November 2nd, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test to make sure everything is kind of sounding as expected here. Okay, so everything sounds fine on my monitoring computer. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. I work as a product specialist for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products. Sorry, just had a call come in, and I'm based in the United States, outside of Washington, D.C. area, in Alexandria, Virginia. So, and how, if you have not attended a live stream, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat or just simply send questions to clubcubase@steinberg.de. So, and when asking questions, if you could indicate which version of Cubase that you're using, whether it's Cubase Elements or Cubase Pro, whether it's version 10, 11, 10.5 on Mac or PC, that information is sometimes helpful. And realize that as people ask questions, my ability to answer them in a real-time manner will quickly be unavailable. So I will try to get through as many of the questions in chronological order as possible. So if we could try to avoid asking the same questions over and over, if you don't see a response, we'll try to get through as many as we possibly can. We usually try to give about 95 to 100 questions per live stream. So we'll try to get through all of those. My family is at home, and my son is home from school today. He's on a fall break, so I may get interrupted, so I'll apologize for any potential interruptions. So I just wanted to give people a heads up with that. And you may hear my wife working directly above me as well. A couple of words of thanks I wanted to pass on. So if you want to, we will have a index of all the topics covered in the live stream today, pinned to the top of the comments field. So look for that like 3 or 4 hours after the live stream. I have to go through and watch the live stream again and do the index with timestamps. But if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered on previous live streams, you could go to Jan has been kind enough to set up a website called cubaseindex.com, and you could search there, and he just kind of did a new refresh of that. So even if you have been there, go check out Jan's site. I think there's over 13,600 questions that we've done in the last year and a half on the live stream. So you could search there, and that will immediately take you to that part of the video. So kudos to Jan for that. We have 2 people that serve as moderators. So we have Agent K and Jazz Dude. So I want to thank them because they're just volunteer their time and their efforts to make the live streams in the community a better place for everyone. And another wonderful resource of Steinberg information Jazz Dude's involved is the Cubase Nation Discord, in addition to all of the official Steinberg resources like the YouTube channel and the Steinberg site. So kudos to Jazz Dude for that as well. So we will go ahead and get started. And if you learn something new, make sure that you do hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure that you do that as well. All right, so we will start our... Okay, so the first question is from Nick. Great to see you on the live stream. It says, hi Greg, I'm setting up commands in generic remote for selecting different mixer layer configurations. Can't find a generic remote set up under any categories. Can this be done? So I think if we wanted to set this up, so let's go to a generic remote. So we'll go to our studio menu, to studio setup, to generic remote. And if we say, okay, we wanted this particular MIDI message, let's go to command, and I think you might be able to do it under channel and track visibility. And then here's where you can set up the different agents in addition to the visibility agents right there. So you could have the 8 user-defined visibility agents that could be configured right there. So once again, just kind of look under command and under channel category, channel and track visibility. So if you look under kind of the mix console, then you may not be able to find it. And then you should be able to, have your generic remote just access and pull up user presets and the different agents right there from a MIDI message. All right, so we have a question. When will Cubase 12 be announced? So generally, Steinberg tends not to announce things until they're actually released. So as of now, it's not released. So, but that's generally how it works. So there's nothing new to indicate with Cubase 12, and we're just on Cubase 11 now. All right, and we see Matt Elder from Canada. So it's great to see you on thanks for joining us on the Zoom meetup last Friday. All right, and we have Kush from San Diego, and we see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin, Robbie Bowling from Dallas, and we see Jan from Stockholm. All right, we have Jeff Sabelski joining from Chico, California, and Rick from Oregon. All right, we have Alexander Plasko from Connecticut, and the Cube from Melbourne, Florida. Okay, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, I made an update from 11 Pro. When I play the song and kick in the MIDI bar to edit some notes, Cubase only plays the MIDI bar I selected. And that's not the workflow I know from Cubase. How to fix. All right, so let me go to just a quick project here with some MIDI in it. Let's get this project loaded. Okay, so let's say if we had some MIDI parts here. So let's say we have this one duplicated. Okay, so it says when I play a song and kick in the middle MIDI bar to edit some notes, Cubase only play the MIDI bar I selected, and that's not the workflow I know from Cubase. So, one of the things that, if we are listening to this, we can see that when it goes to the next event, that as we do this, it'll just kind of fast forward and it will play. Okay, so it says when you kick in a MIDI bar, so I'm not sure if it's going to be like when you double click, if that's what you mean by kicking in a MIDI bar. Some notes only play the MIDI bar selected, and that's not the workflow. So, check to make sure, like if you have so if it's that when you double click that you're only hearing the MIDI for the event, make sure that within the editor that you don't have solo turned on in the editor. So if you have kind of a large MIDI sequence and then you double click, and if solo is turned on in the editor, that will mute all of the other parts. So let me know if you may just have to turn off the solo within the MIDI editor, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding the question. Okay, so we see from the Cube, says used Beat Designer in a couple of my songs you showed me last time, and I was wondering about arpeggiation. So if you wanted to do arpeggiation, so let's say if I just play a chord here, kind of like the Beat Designer is a MIDI plugin, but we could have, if we go to Arpeggi, here we could actually choose to have kind of different, so as I play, We could have arpeggios directly here. So I say, okay, I want this to be eighth notes. So at this point I can say, okay, let's just make these the step size to eighth notes. So, and as you would just hold down. So you could just kind of do different arpeggios, and there's kind of an Apache 5, which could be a pretty, you know, you could do all sorts of kind of great arpeggios here. You know, where you could have like your different velocities, different key ranges, and then there's the Apache SX, where you could kind of do a bit more with that. So if you wanted to just kind of, let's take a look at, so let's say, okay, we will take this to eighth note triplets. So as we, and what's kind of cool about the Apache SX MIDI plugin is you could take any part, any MIDI part. So I'll just right click to always on top, and then you could drag and drop the sequence. So at that point, you could just drag and drop a MIDI part and use that as the basis for the arpeggio. So check out the MIDI plugins like Apache SX and Apache 5. And if you actually come over here, let's say if I want to just record this, you know, if you click on the little record icon, now when I just hold down a chord, at that point it will, you could just kind of record all of the different arpeggios directly into the event as well. So so if you wanted to actually record with that, you could just click on the record enable here. So without that, it will play back the arpeggio. I had that on step record as well, but if you wanted to actually record the output of the arpeggiation in real time, you could just click on this little record button. And so that's how you could do some arpeggiations. All right, so we see, I think this is from Mr. OX, or I think it's Lennox. Says, hi Greg, I sent an email regarding a suspected bug in the media bay for Cubase 10, 11 on Windows 10. So let's see, I think I remember the email without referring to it. So if we go to our media bay window, let's come over here and just go to like our large media bay. And I think the question was, when we come over here to, if I understood it right, it was when we go to select a file here that we could say search for, and then we would see the path. Okay, so right now when we search for the path and we look at the folder here, you know, part of the file name is actually, you know, the path, the file name itself is in the path. So I'm going to say contains. And then like we don't see the actual path here, but if I wanted to, I could just delete the name of the file. So I'll just kind of start over just so I get to the end here. So let's say, I'll go to a different project. So let's say if I come here to bass sample, okay, so we're here, and what I want to do is to actually just right click, and we'll say search for path. Now, when we have this path name, we actually see that we're going to have the name of the file. So that is the path, is the file. So if I just kind of back that up and now we choose contains, that now I could search all within that particular path right there. So, you know, make sure that when you select something for the search in path, that it's going to carry the full path of the file name. So I know that you don't see the, you know, I think in the forum post that you had shared that you don't necessarily see, let's say if we kind of go back over here, and I don't have an external drive hooked up, but you know, at this point you could see kind of the file tree here, but you know, see if you know, because the file path, I believe from what you're doing was actually the file path was, you know, included the file name. So that's why you don't see results until you actually go here and, you know, choose to do. And at this point, you could choose the file path and go back one level. And then we could say contains, and then you'll see all the folders within that. So let me know, Lennox, if that makes sense, or if I'm kind of misunderstanding kind of what you want to accomplish with that. Okay, so we just see how do you, from the cube, how do you use Retrolog with arpeggiators that change throughout the chord progression? Can you automate the arpeggiator? So, you know, one of the things you could do is, let's say if I, and I'll just open up Retrolog instance. Let me see if I have one. Okay, so I have a Retrolog here. Okay, now if I wanted this to, let's say I just put in like chord, I'll just move this up to the top here, and we'll have a chord track. Okay, so let's say I have this as my chord progression, and if I just have this track set to monitored, so let's say if now we could just, all right, so this is kind of a monophonic part. So what I want to do is I think without even having the parts in here, I could just have the Arpeggi. So let's say, so I could have this a chord track, and I could have that chord track automatically play and check the used monitor tracks. I put the synth bass track into monitor, and I don't even have to have any actual notes in the part. It'll just trigger the arpeggio. So that's how you could kind of automate the arpeggio from Retrolog, you know, or automate an arpeggio through the Apache or Apache SX plugins, and have it automatically conform to the chords. Okay, so we see a question, where to change the drum map in Groove Agent SE5. All right, so let's say if I have a Groove Agent here, so I could, one of the great things with Groove Agent is, you know, we could come over here if we don't have a drum map that's already been configured. I'll just add, just to kind of show from scratch. So I'm going to add an instrument track, and we'll add a Groove Agent SE. Okay, so now when we go to our instrument, okay, so if we wanted to automatically create the drum map, all you have to do is if you click on the drum map setup. So with Groove Agent SE, you could actually just click here on create drum map from instrument, and then that will automatically create the drum map for Groove Agent SE. So now when we double click, we will go directly into a particular, we go into the drums, and as we see, we can now see our kick, you know, our different sounds can automatically be extracted. But if you needed to actually change that, you could come over here and go to the drum map setup. But within Groove Agent SE, it's automatically going to be able to extract that. So now if I wanted to take a part here, I could double click, I could see its drum map, and you could just, you know, come right over to this particular area and just kind of paint notes in and see the drum map. So Groove Agent SE will automatically, you know, be able to extract the drum map for you. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer just saying, thanks for a great Cubase Zoom. Had to leave early to find his, leave early to find his lost keys. We're glad he could be there. It was wonderful to have Daryl Pearson kind of share some knowledge. Okay, so we have a question from Ted Springman. Is it possible to set up multiple virtual instruments so that when they receive the same pitch, detune CC, that each will offset to a slightly higher value than all of the others? So, you know, generally when we're doing something like that, you know, it could be up to the particular instrument, how much it's going to respond to pitch bend. So if we do, let's say if I look at my Retrolog here, you could set, you know, the amount of pitch bend, you know, up or down per instance. So let's say if I add, you know, a Hallian Sonic SE that at that point, so if I wanted to come here to the electric piano that's playing back through Hallian Sonic SE. Okay, and we'll look at this. Just trying to remember where to. I'll just add a new instance here. So. Okay, so once we're see if I remember where to do this or to, but you know, each instrument could have its own pitch bend values set. So if I wanted to, let's see if it's kind of, I usually forget where this is in Hallian Sonic SE, but let's see if it's under options. But, you know, so each actual, each instrument, here, I'll just do it this way. So let's say if I just come here, I'll duplicate this track. Then on this particular instrument, we could set the pitch bend range differently, so that when I play the two different parts here, that they will pitch bend different amounts. So it's really up to the instrument on how it responds to the pitch bend information. So you could set that independently on different instruments, Ted. Are you reading through comments? All right, so I'm kind of back to found my place. Sorry about that. All right, so we just had, just a question, can you send a link of Stylus Remix Indian library, please? So, you know, maybe you could check with Spectrasonics, but I don't have Stylus to give away. Okay, so we have a question. It says, hello, Greg. I often use MIDI modifier to keep playing an easier key, but then in piano roll, when I move a note, the note I hear isn't relative to the new key. Thank you. All right, so let's say if we had like this little electric piano part here. So as we do this, and let's say if I go to my MIDI modifiers and I'm transposing, and we listen, that we hear the actual, but when we do this, we actually aren't moving the keys. So when we come over here to the track and we adjust the MIDI modifiers, this is just playing it back in real time. So if you actually kind of just move the events, at that point, it's going to move it based on the actual pitch here. So if you've done that and you want to start moving, what you need to do is to actually come over here and choose Freeze MIDI Modifiers. And that will then move the notes up based upon the settings that were, basically what this does is it will write the settings here actually into the part. So if you wanted to play it in a key of C and then have it play back in C sharp, you could, and then you move it and you wanted to hear it in C sharp instead of C, just go to your MIDI menu and go to Freeze MIDI Modifiers, and then it will adjust accordingly. So if I have this set to transpose, otherwise, because this is just processing that in real time. So this will basically allow you to take the settings here and apply that to the data. So as soon as I come over here, Freeze MIDI Modifiers, it's now going to transpose up 6 semitones. So as we just do that, so that's probably what you need to do. So just, select the part and go to MIDI and select Freeze MIDI Modifiers. All right, so we see, is there a tutorial on designing sounds in Retrolog? So yeah, I remember watching Dom Segalis on the Steinberg YouTube channel. Kind of did a whole series on Retrolog. So yeah, you could look on the Steinberg YouTube channels. It might be in Cubase or it might be in the instruments under Retrolog, but yeah, check out Dom's video. He does a wonderful job. All right, so we have Pablo joining from Galicia, España. All right. All right, so we see a question. Does someone know if it's possible to create a personalized MIDI velocity curve on Cubase 11 Artist? Okay, so let's say if I had a bunch of notes here. All right, so let's say this is my velocity curve. So when I look, I wanted to capture this as a personalized, just do it on 2 different parts here. So okay, so let's say I have that's my velocity curve that I want. So what I could do is actually take this event and I'm going to open up my and this seems like a bit of a left-handed approach, but we're going to open up the Quantize panel preset here, and then we're going to just drag that event in. We're going to set, and we see position and velocity. So here position is set to 100% and velocity set to 0%. Let's just switch those. So I'm going to set the position to 100% and the velocity to 100%. All right, so now that we've done that, so we could actually just kind of save that particular event. So let's say at this point I go back and I have this. I could now quantize with this preset here, and I just hit the letter Q, and that will automatically just kind of set the velocity curve that we could just have indicated directly there. So this way, you know, we take what is a quantized preset, but we just choose to have it only capture the velocity and not the position, and then you could save a custom velocity curve. All right, so we see a question from Ted Springman. Does Cubase have an expansive library of impulse response reverbs from famous concert halls? Yeah, so if you just come over here, let's go to the reverence. They may not be named by the name of the concert hall, but often you can, you know, get kind of a sense of what's going on. So let's say if you just wanted to come over here, you go to the reverence. So just come right over here to reverb. So when we come over here, and at this point you could just browse. So you see Austrian concert halls. So you kind of see a depiction of that. If you want, you know, concert hall in Vienna, you know, a Dutch concert hall, New York ballrooms, English chapels. So these will kind of all French stone chapel. These will be kind of different impulse responses. So taken from actual, you know, ambient environments. So many great concert halls you could find directly in there. All right, so we see Jason Sykes, who's watching the live stream from a hotel room in Manchester. So I guess he's out on business. So, all right, and we have Peter checking in from Montreal. Thanks for joining. All right, we see that Michael Teams has joined the live stream, so we should have the virtual ice creams dispensed. All right, so we see a question from the Cube. Also having trouble with my chord pads. Some chords in the chord pads won't be dragged to the tracks area, so I don't think I've had problems with that, but let's go ahead and just take a look. So say if I have my chord pads here, you know, just dragging them, you know, it seems like it's kind of working as expected here. I could load up some other presets. So it seems if you have like particular chords or particular chord position that you're seeing that it's not being able to drag from, just let me know. Okay. Okay, so we see a question, how to enlarge Cubase engine on Macs because every window and text is very small. So it really depends on your screen resolution. So I'm currently running at a 1080p resolution, which is 1920 by 1080 resolution. But if you just if you're finding that it's too small, just go to your system preferences and go to your display settings. Let me just see if we can find it here. So go to your displays, and then you could actually see you can see kind of default for display, and then you could adjust there. So I have a little utility so that I could have it scaled for my monitor 1080p so that it works friendly for people watching on TVs, but it's just going to be your Mac system, and then you could adjust there. Just go to your display settings. Okay, so we see from the Cube, he meant the arpeggiation in Retrolog and not from the chord track. So let's go ahead and jump back to where we were. So let's say if I come over here to so even if we have the chord track here laid out for us, all right, so let's say if we have this going on, and so I will turn off the arpeggiator here. So I'll just come over here to the MIDI insert. So we'll turn that off. So let's say, all right, so now we have, so now let's say if I wanted to now turn on the arpeggiator in Retrolog, so it should just follow these particular parameters. So let's come over here to the arpeggiator. And now as it plays back these chords, so let's say, okay, now we wanted this to, let's say, just more contemporary arpeggios. So now, so for this, if we wanted to just change the arpeggio to eighth note, adjust your velocity. So that way it will, if you have it just following the chord track, the arpeggiator within Retrolog will automatically follow as well. Okay, so we see a question. Hey, Greg, if I want to copy 4 bars, where can I find repeat? In previous versions, there was repeat. There's multiple ways of doing this. So if we wanted to, let's say if I have, all right, so let's say if I want this, so say if I wanted to repeat this event, so one way is just to hit Control or Command D. So you could do that. There's also just a repeat function. I think it's Control K. So here we could say, okay, repeat that 4 times. So we could do that. The easiest way is, select the event if you go to the right edge center and just drag across. You could also, if you hold down the Alt key and go to the lower, Alt or Option key and go to the lower right-hand side, you could just drag across like that and repeat as well. So you could do Control or Command D to duplicate the event if you know that you wanted to repeat it 16 times or 15 times exactly. Control or Command K, or just kind of use the Alt or Option key and drag from the lower right hand corner, or just drag from the right center edge out to the right, and then you could repeat. Okay, so we see Nick just saying, hi guys, forgot it started an hour earlier in UK. Clocks, yeah, sometimes it's tricky with daylight savings times, in different countries. I remember one time, maybe about 15 years ago, I was traveling to Germany, and it was daylight saving time in London as I was flying over. So I kind of got messed up by an hour there. When I left, it was daylight savings time in Germany, and then like 2 weeks later, it was daylight savings time in the U.S. So I was, adamant that it was already the clocks had changed already when I got back to the U.S. So yeah, it's tricky in different countries with daylight saving times, but we're glad that you could join the live stream. Okay, so we have Jim Reeder checking in from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So thanks for joining. Okay, so we just see Nick just saying, anybody having issues with hub not loading? So I had it on my system with 1104, and then Steinberg had released an 1104.1. And that seemed to work and fix the hub not working for me. So. All All right, so a question, sorry if I answered already, but what is the status using Cubase and stock plugins with Mac Pro M1 Max chip? My Mac tech says soon it will be very powerful, but lots of money. Let's see, $3 signs. I'm assuming that's lots of money. So currently, you know, everything is running under Rosetta mode. You know, I know that the development team is actively working on getting everything converted over, you know, for this M1 chip. So we'll see how, you know, that progress is coming along. So. All right, so just seeing from Mr. OX, and this is about the media bay. So it says, but it doesn't work that way for factory content. So let's go ahead and take a look. So when I just went to like this MIDI loop, it seems to kind of work the same way. So I see the actual file here. And let's say if I just wanted to come over here, I select this and we search for a path. That it's still kind of the file level. So let me know if I'm doing something wrong, Lennox, but that seems to kind of work the same way with factory content or with user content, like with the WAV files that we did previously. All right, you see Michael Teams is on. He's in action dispensing virtual ice cream. Okay, so we just see a question. All of your high-end film composer clients, what percentage use Mac versus PC as primary computer? And when asked, which platform do you recommend to your power users? So I try not to recommend a particular platform because Cubase runs great. It seems like there's a lot of like really high-end film composers that I work with tend to work on Windows because they could have, you know, significantly more memory. A couple have moved kind of to the last generation of Mac Pros, but most of them seem to be on Windows platform, just because the availability of, like, you know, having so much RAM and being able to incrementally update their computers. So I see more Windows platforms and really high-end composers suites. All right, so we see question, if maximum track count using sample libraries is a goal, what type of computer build is generally recommended? So, a lot of guys will have, like as much NVMe hard drive space as they can, as much memory. Most of my film composer clients won't even, bare minimum would be 128 gigs of RAM, sometimes 256 or 384. So, and then they'll just try to keep going. So we see that Pablo just saying he really likes Groove Agent SE for drum replacement. So that's great for replacement or reinforcement. All right, we see Peter just saying the Zoom meeting was so informative. Thank you. Yes, I always really appreciate the Zoom meetings, and it's wonderful, Daryl, to join in and share insights. And it's always wonderful to meet people. Okay. All right, just lost my place. Let me just find it. Okay, so we see a question. Is there a Cubase for Android phones? Yet I'm not at home and need to leave these beats. So you could get Cubases for Android. So I run it on my Samsung Galaxy phone. So and then you could take the Cubases projects that you create in Cubases for Android or Chromebook or iOS, and then import that directly into Cubase. So once you complete that, you could come right over here and just import. You could download a little utility, and that will allow you to import your Cubases project. So I run it on my Samsung Galaxy S20 FE phone. So. All right, so we see Soren from Sweden. He's just waiting for answers. He had sent some questions about a friend of his having some Groove Agent SE issues. And one other thing, I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the email, Soren, if you could check to see if what his buffer size is set to as well. That could be an interesting information to have. Okay, so we just see from the cube. Okay, then how do you design an evolving arpeggiation that changes in the arpeggiator in Retrolog? So if you're doing this where you have, just the arpeggiator, what you could do to evolve it is just kind of, very easily, hold different notes. So let's say if we're here and we're kind of playing along. So as I just play different chords, it's just going to kind of use the chords that I feed it. So if I just play different chords, it's going to arpeggiate different different notes, and probably once we open up the arpeggiators, let's say if we record this and automate the plugin, and let's say I just start moving different parts. And let's see if it if it recorded all the automation we did on the arpeggiator. It doesn't look like it recorded that as automation data, but you know, once you just kind of feed, you know, different notes into it, the arpeggiator is going to evolve too. So. All right, so we see there's some confusion in Europe for European people with the time change with daylight saving time, so sorry about that. Okay, so I just see why sometimes I don't hear Media Bay in my monitor, only in my headphones. Thank you. So this could be tied to a preference. So if you come over here, let's go to your preferences to under VST to control room. That you could check to make sure that you have use phones channel as preview channel. If that's unchecked, it'll go through the speakers. If it's checked, it'll go through the headphones. So once again, just go to preferences, to Cubase, and then check this preference right there, the use phones channel as preview channel. See John Koskian saying, may I request the like button? So I'm sure you could probably find it. And make sure you hit it an odd number of times. Okay, so we see from Sergo just saying the Addictive Drums 2 plugin has presets for various drum maps. Perhaps you can tell Greg how to move them into the general map of the Cubase drum map. So really, if you know, and it's great that they created drum maps, but all you have to do if you have drum maps is when you come right over here, you could just say, go to drum map setup. And then you'll see under functions, you could just load wherever that drum map is on your hard drive. So once you go to the drum map setup here, so just the very top inspector tab, you'll see kind of, and it may say no drum map by default. Click there and go to drum map setup. And under functions, at that point, you could just choose to load. And at that point, you could just find wherever that drum map is on your system and load up that particular drum map. Okay, so I just see, would you consider making a comprehensive tutorial on the Supervision plugin? So I did. So if you look under like the Cubase 11 feature walkthroughs, I did, I think, a 10-minute video on Supervision, so you could check that out. But I think it's like 10 or 12 minutes just on Supervision. So it's just see a question from the Cube. Hey, Greg, what will computer music be like in 30 years? That's a great question. I'm not sure, you know, I think it's heading more this direction where, you know, it's kind of a very interesting question if we were to look at 30 years back, if anyone could have anticipated, you know, what we'd be doing in Cubase now. But I can pretty much guarantee you that in 30 years that, you know, Cubase will still be defining the feature sets of, you know, what is going to be kind of state of the art for music production. So, but yeah, great question. See Ted Springman just saying 4 years ago I spent 4K on for my trash can Mac and it struggles to keep up now. So that's why, you know, some people, a lot of composers will kind of, you know, do PCs and they could do incremental updates and, you know, maybe swap out a motherboard, keep all the same drives, you know, and do stuff like that. Some people find that to be a good method of, you know, continually evolving. Okay, so we see from the cube, how do you input chords into empty MIDI regions without the chord track? You know, so you could do even like, you know, step input. So let's say if I have an empty part here, okay, so I will just put it in step input. And I'll just switch, say I want to put in whole notes. And so I will put step input, put a whole notes, and then I could just actually just play chords. So once you do that, then you could populate chords pretty easily without having to use a chord track. Chord track's pretty fast too. All right, so we see Jazz Dudes on the live stream. So he got caught up in the time change. Sorry about that. I think we go through our time change this Sunday in the US, so hopefully it'll be kind of all in sync on normal times for next week. All right, so we have Stefan checking in from Sweden. Thanks for joining us. We see Jameson Alencar just says Cubase is the best DAW, so I agree with you. Okay, so we just see, is there a way to add insert plugins and define them as default inserts for all track types? So, you know, if you wanted to come over here, you know, so you could add track presets. So let's say, you know, if you wanted to, you know, we have an audio track here and it has, you know, this insert. So let's say if I just, so if I wanted this, I could just come right over here and, you know, save the track preset and call that up. And when I go to add tracks, we could say load track preset, and you could do it like that. And also, so it may not be like, you know, for every time we add a channel, add this plugin, because, you know, that may not be so useful, but you could also, you know, say, okay, I wanted to take, you know, add plugins to all of these tracks, and, you know, I could enable quick link just right here and say, okay, just wanted to add, you know, a dual filter for all of the tracks. So, you know, you could, or I'll do for the selected track here. So let's say, okay, we'll come over here. Let's add more filter to all the selected tracks. So there's a number of ways to do that. So I don't know many times when you'd want to have like, maybe, I guess maybe with an EQ if you have that, but a lot of times people would want kind of a clean slate for each track or have a, just to have a template set up. But it's easy to add inserts to multiple tracks as well, pretty, very easily. Okay, so just see what is version of your Cubase. I'm running 11.041. I may have old projects that may say, created in version 8 or something like that, but it's I'm running version 11.041. All right, so we have Dave McKay checking in. Wonderful for you to be able to join us. And we have Chris Hallam checking in from Columbia, South Carolina. All right, so we have a question. How can I sync delay to quarter note when time signature is off, like 6/8 or 5/8? Okay, so I have a project here that's in 6/8. I think this one's in 6/8. So, if you have a quarter note, it will be a quarter note regardless of the time, regardless of the meter. So let's say if I'm here. You stare at the ground, not a sound. So let's say, we're in 6/8. So at this point, if I added a delay, I'll just put it as an insert just for. All right, so let's say we'll make this a quarter note delay. So it'll be a quarter note delay regardless of the meter. A lot of times musically, you may want to make it like a dotted quarter. So, just because it's in 5/8, 6/8, the delay time, which is an automatable parameter, you could just adjust to like a dotted value, like a dotted quarter note, is a great delay time for working in 6/8, or you could just make it a straight 8th note delay. So if you're right here, but it will still be a quarter note delay. So the delay time is variable. So it could be a quarter note, and that would be 2 beats of 6/8. So you could just kind of change and automate. So if you do have meter changes in your song, you may have to automate the delay times changing to make those fit. Okay, so we just see, can you make your own reverb reflection for reverence, and how would you go about doing that? So many people will capture their own impulses. So let's say if we wanted to go to reverence here. So some people will, go through, some people have like popped a balloon just to have that impulse. There's some samples that people will use. So if you actually come directly over here, you could just have. So let me just make this a little louder to. Just to hear this a little bit. All right, so when we have an impulse, all right, so we can hear and audition kind of what the room sounds like. What some people will do is kind of pop a balloon and record the ambient characteristics, but you could also use this as just kind of a quick, let's set our mix to 0% here. So some people, you could actually just kind of take this particular sound and that could trigger the impulse response. So if you just kind of, play that really loud in a room, record the sound and just kind of take off this very initial click, so if we do this now, we can monitor so if we wanted to, we could listen to the actual room. And then once you take that recording, all you have to do is just click on import, and it's just directing it to the WAV file, and then you could create your own WAV files. I had a friend who was, made his whole career in his room in New York, and it was being torn down as part of the, turning, great classic legendary studio into, condos. Was kind of a victim to that, and he just loved the sound of his tracking room, so he just recorded the impulse response and was able to import that and keep working so he could still have the sound of his legendary room. He just captured it, and so when he's working now at home, happily, that he can still have the legendary sound just by importing that impulse response. All right, you're seeing Jeff Zabowski wants 2 scoops of ice cream by showing a peace sign emoji. So it's good to know. All right, and we have Cedric checking in from India. And I guess in India, it's the Festival of Lights for 10 days starting today. So it's great. Thanks for letting us know, Cedric. All right, so we see from Cubase Junkie says, if your global tempo is, I guess it's a question, let me read it. If your global tempo is set a certain way, you have to manually change that. Okay, I guess this is with the tempo sync for the delay. So. Okay, reading through. All right, so we just see Cubase Junkie just mentioning, oh yeah, if you have presets saved in Cubase 11, like presets for effects and instruments, make sure you put them in a folder. Last year, a lot of people uninstalled Cubase 10. So generally that folder, those presets will still be there. So if you uninstall Cubase 10, they will still be saved in the user category. But one thing you could do, if you're migrating from previous versions and you have lots of stuff, is just to come over here and from your edit menu, just go to the profile manager and export a profile and import it into the new version. So. All right, so we have Thermonuclear War joining from Serbia. See a lot of people joining an hour late or so. All right, so Jeff Sabelski's asking if he heard I was psychic. Says, Greg, will Barbara let me record her playing my jazz flute solo I wrote when she gets back from Maine tomorrow? And will she convince Greg, her husband, to play the bass part? I heard you were psychic. I think if you ask really nicely, but probably if you used a Michael Teen's method of convincing someone by ice cream is always good. So try that. All right, so we see Uno Memento checking in late from Finland. It says didn't notice the change in time. So yeah, I guess our continents are 1 hour off this week with daylight savings time. So, but I think we'll be back next week, all in sync. So just be aware for Friday's live stream. All right, so we have Patty checking in from Frankfurt, Germany. All right, so we're seeing from Sergo just saying in Russia there are paid courses on FL Studio and Ableton. On Cubase, no. There are free ones, but they did not give anything when I went to them for a whole year. So, you know, a lot of times it's just a good business model for the facilities to kind of teach you stuff that you could probably learn on live streams for, you know, little investment financially. So. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. Sorry about that. All right, so I think I'm in the ballpark where I was. All right, so we just see someone saying Studio One or Cubase. So I think Cubase is a better program, so you could definitely check it out. And we do these wonderful live streams that you could learn all sorts of great stuff. So we see Jarlath Quinn just saying he enjoyed the last 10 minutes of the Zoom meeting and he was having a technical issue with the sound. He usually uses MS Teams. So yeah, sometimes I had to go back and forth all the time, but we're glad that you could make it. Sorry that you weren't able to get in earlier. All right, so we're just seeing Cubase Junkie just says, you know, Groove Agent drum samples are top notch in quality. So yeah, you can get a lot of great stuff. All right, John Costigan is just asking, have you hit the like button today? Smack it. So. All right, Michael Teams has granted me 3 scoops of Scoopy's Black Diamond ice cream. He always has the best flavors. So. All right, so we have a question, why there are charges when there's an upgrade version available at Cubase and upgrade charges are too high. So, you know, I think if you looked at, you know, features that are delivered in, you know, many companies that, you know, as there's new versions, you'll see that, you know, Cubase will often deliver 4 or 5 times the amount of new features in an upgrade. So you don't have to purchase the upgrade, but, you know, it does take, you know, significant effort and time to, you know, to develop that and do all the engineering behind it. So, and that's how we're able to continue to provide great cutting edge tools for our customers. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. Okay, so we're just saying from the cube, just saying print the ARPs out one at a time, then design the sound in Retrolog to taste, to go over that in Dom Segalis's channel. So yeah, you could do that. And something else that you could do is, let's say if, just do a new project here quickly. So if you really like the kind of the ARPs in Retrolog, just try to go back to this project here quickly. All right, so let's say if we have, here's kind of a cool trick that a lot of people probably wouldn't know. So let's say if we have within Retrolog our particular arpeggiation going on. You know, one thing you could do is actually just hit record, and then as you just kind of play, so, and now that after you hit record, you can just drag that particular arpeggiator out. And then if you wanted to apply this arpeggiator to other tracks, maybe not a Retrolog instrument, if you go to the MIDI inserts, we go to the Apache SX, and let's say this is our arpeggio from there, and then we could just grab this arpeggio from this sequence and drop it right in. So as we play, you could just use that particular arpeggio on other instruments as well if you wanted to match it, if they didn't have like the similar style of arpeggiator from Retrolog. Okay, seeing some more information from Soren, so that's good to know. Thanks for letting me know, and you can send me an email. Okay, so we just see says, hi, I'm new to Cubase. The color coding system in this software is super confusing. I'm not referring to tracks, but some buttons on the right are blue. Change at the bottom, not sure what to infer. So if you could let me know, like exactly, you know, which, so if it's not with this particular, so it says, you know, some buttons on the right are blue. So, you know, if this is the right hand zone, that would indicate that that is selected. Orange at the bottom. Orange could be when we're dealing with send effects. So let's say if I add a send effect. I will come over here. Let's so sometimes depending on if the track is in pre or post fader. So if I move it to, so let's say if I want it to come here, we could, you know, so depending on, so like pre and post fader could make a difference as well. So let's say if we come here to inserts, just go to like an audio track here just to show. So let's say if we go to inserts, and then if I wanted this to be to post fader, so that's when you could see stuff in orange, pre-fader in blue. So that's why, you know, so sometimes the colors, I know if you're just kind of starting off, that could be a little confusing, but you know, you should be able to, you know, the color distinctions do make sense for a reason, so it could indicate like signal flow. All right, wonderful to see Jim Hintz on the live stream. It says just saying hi to me and my son Ryan. So it was wonderful to see you in the live stream. Miss seeing you in person at Washington Music. Hopefully we'll be able to get started maybe in the spring next year. All right, so we see Jeff Sabelski just saying, sorry that you missed the Zoom meetup. So hopefully next one you can do it. I think it's going to be the Tuesday after Thanksgiving in the United States. So just see, hello Greg, are there any synth modules in Cubase that can be edited in the same way as a synth like Serum? You know, so there are a lot of different synthesizers. So I don't have Serum, so I don't have a license for it, but you know, depending, so I you know, but there's lots of, if you want to do, you know, different synthesis options for, let me just go over here. Let's say, you know, to the synthesizer part, there will be, you know, different modules inside of like Howley Sonic SE. So if you wanted to add an instrument track here, and let's say if you wanted it to be more kind of like a wavetable synth, you could come over here and these will be different modules. So if you wanted to, you know, come over, let me see the one I was thinking of, like Flux. You know, you can now come over here. So I'm not familiar with Serum. I don't have a license of it, but as you go to the edit here, you could adjust, you know, different formats and filters. And if you get more into, you know, the position of the waveform. So, but let me know if it's a particular type of synthesis, or if you want to email me a screenshot. You know, I'd be happy to take a look at it, and you can email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. So we have a question. Do I need to install Groove Agent SE content if I already bought and installed the full version of Groove Agent 5? Thanks. So I think it would be the same. So I don't think it's necessary to do that. But I could try to do some research on it, but I believe that the full version of Groove Agent 5 would have all of the content from Cubase as well, plus more. All right, so you see, what is the standard PC or laptop configuration for Cubase 11 Pro? So there really isn't a standard configuration. I know a lot of My R&B producer friends tend to like the Asus notebooks, and we'll kind of load it up with the i9. MacBook Pros are popular too, and you could just run Windows on if you get like an i9 MacBook Pro. So it actually, I find that the Windows works better on the MacBook Pro than Mac OS does for a lot of stuff. So, but there isn't a standard, a lot of people like, Intel chips, a lot of people like the Ryzen chips for the, cost to benefit ratio. So. Excuse me. All right. So I just see, hello, Greg. Is it possible for each individual chord to create different arpeggio patterns in Retrolog? So I think that as Retrolog, I believe when we go to the arpeggiator, that it's going to be kind of global and not based on the chords. But let me just take a look and see if I wanted to. You might be able to go to quarter, and I don't think that this would do different arpeggios for each chord. So you may have to kind of manually do that. But a lot of times the arpeggio will, you could just, as the chord is changed and as you change the chord voicings, you'll get different results from the arpeggiator. So if I play just a block F major chord, you may get different results than kind of changing different voicings on it. All right, so we have a question. Hello, Greg. Is there a list of Cubase functionalities that a beginner could reference for practicing Cubase? There's not like a particular list of Cubase functionalities. And it really could depend on, what is basic functions to one person. Like, let's say if you're a classical composer doing soundtracks versus doing hip hop, those could be two very different things. So what I would suggest is figuring out what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, and, say, okay, today I want to work on programming a drum beat, or I want to work on vocals, and then kind of do research and look at YouTube videos and search the Cubase index for particular things like that, because everyone's going to have different things that they need. And, I know people that, do incredibly successful work using Cubase, and they work completely differently and have a completely different approach, and it's, they're both valid. So. All right, so I just see discussion, I think it's directed towards Cubase Junkie. I look, but cannot find how to uninstall just a hub other than simply deleting a DLL files. Any clues? So I think what you could do, I think that there's a preference. So let's go maybe under general. So try under general and just uncheck use hub and see if that will kind of do what you want to accomplish. All right, so we just see question, does the Cube has his own channel to Greg for asking questions? So, anyone could ask questions. It's, there's no limit to questions. So, if we didn't have questions, we wouldn't have live stream. So everyone could ask as many questions as they want. All right, so we just see from says still waiting for Cubase Jab to download the knowledge directly into my brain. So if you keep watching all the live streams, it'll just come in. All the knowledge will be there by osmosis. So you can put it on as you go to sleep. Okay, so we just see which method can quickly produce a one-page chord charts with lyrics, essential riffs, etc. for a one-page printout in Score, fake book format. All right, so let's come over here. So I think I have a project where my friend Clay does this. Wonderful Clay Ostwald. Let me just see if I have his project in. Okay, we'll just get this open. It's kind of a big project. And you can check out Clay's work with, did a bunch of the big Gloria Estefan hits and Seventh Crossing. So I think if we look at this project, that often, let's see if it's in this one or it might be. So what Clay does in his projects is just under parts, he has kind of like a lead sheet. So when we go to look at this in the Score editor, so here, you know, you could just put the slashes in, you could put rehearsal marks. So you could put melodies in as you see this, and then I think Clay has it where it's also transposed to B flat for like for trumpets and alto sax, so that, you know, they could just kind of play the lines just kind of you know, just like that. So but you could, you know, put in the chords directly from the chord chart, or just put them in and put the slashes in as well. So and then lyrics can be added just by going to the lyrics here, and as you just wanted to type, hit the tab key, and then you could have the lyrics in as well. All right, so we see just a question. What do you believe is the best feature added between 9.5 to version 11? So I would say in 10, just kind of the new graphic user interface overall, I think has been really appealing to me. I really, in version 10, was also kind of the Very Audio 2.0. I think that the improved side chaining was really welcome. I like, you know, stuff like the included plugins like Destroyer and you know, Squasher were great additions, and Supervision. If you're a composer, probably the export audio functionality with the job cues in 11 was really significant. But I think that each, you know, those are just some personal ones, but, you know, and different features will be more significant depending upon the projects you do and your workflow. But Okay, reading through more. All right, so we see how to draw, multiply MIDI notes longer, same time in a logical, in the key editor, Pro 11. All right, so let me just... Okay, so just reread this. How to draw multiple MIDI notes longer at the same time. So if we, have these notes selected in the key editor, and I'll just make this larger so it's easier to see. I'll just draw some in here. So if I just have these selected, we could just kind of draw, extend the length of the selected notes, and I turn my snap off and now it's not going to. So you could do it just kind of like that, just whatever notes are selected. And at that point you could just, extend the length. So let me know, if these notes are all selected here, we could just adjust our length multiply. So let me know if that's what you want to accomplish. All right, so we have Scott Maxon checking in from Los Angeles. Thanks for joining. All right, we have Paul Gandhi checking in from Toronto. Okay, so we see, can you show how to use the spectrum analyzer to help EQ a mic, or would it not be helpful? So let's say, okay, so let's say if I'm looking at this and I wanted to EQ maybe the saxophone part. So we can see kind of the spectrum view here. So a lot of times, you could see the exact notes. So you can say there's a lot of activity here. And maybe you want to kind of cut those frequencies. And you can say this is probably... So being able to know what, what frequencies are present. And as they say, okay, this is a little kind of wonky here, you could adjust. And just kind of scoop that out if that's bothering you. And you could almost see kind of the melody. And where else gets to be handy is, let's say I wanted to take this saxophone and we could add a different track. So I could go to like the vocals. And then you could switch. And now I could EQ the vocals. And you can see which tracks. So you can see, like, if you have two tracks that are kind of fighting each other frequency-wise, you can see the other EQ frequency. And then say, okay, I just wanted to EQ the vocal down. Now I wanted to EQ the sax. And you could toggle back and forth. So now I wanted to come here to, and now I'm EQing the sax, now I'm EQing the vocal, and you can see there are two frequency spectrums kind of in the background. So that's helpful for doing a lot of EQing and how you could use the spectrum. All right, it's reading on. All right, so you see a question. It says, I got a MIDI question. Can I have a MIDI track record from a MIDI controller, the note C1 and only C1, even if I press the whole octave? Can I do this in Cubase? Thanks a million. So if you only wanted to filter like all notes to only be C1, let me just find, so let's say, okay, so if you go to the input transformer here, we could make this be local or global, and we want to activate it, and we could say function, we want to filter, and we could say we want to filter notes, and we could say value 1, which is pitch, we want to say unequal to C1. So what this will do is once this is active, this module is active, it will not record any notes other than C1 for this particular track. And we could have this be local or be global. So if you wanted to save that as a preset, so just come over here and you could save it as a preset if you wanted to, but under function, choose filter and say type is equal to note. And then we want to say the value 1, which will be pitch, is unequal to C1. So any note that is unequal to C1 will be filtered and you won't be able to hear. So only C1 will be heard. So you could just do that, save it as a preset. All right, so we see John Costigan just saying, thanks for the tip on importing a reverb impulse, Revelation using Revelation. So that's actually the Revelation using Reverence. So, but yeah, it's a great trick. So I know you did a lot of work in theater, so you could probably have the sound of the theater as well and capture that. And there's lots of great impulses that you could import from the web as well. Right. Just have to respond to a quick text. All right, so we see CC checking in from the UK. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we have Erkan checking in from Turkey. Thanks for being part of the live stream. All right, my chat field jumped on me, so let me see if I can get back. Okay, so I think I'm back to where I was. All right, so we see question, does Cubase run just fine with Rosetta on the Apple Silicon chip, like on a new Mac Mini with the M1 chip? So it does. So so we have many people getting very happy with their performance. So we see, and when will Cubase run native Apple Silicon? So, you know, I know the development team is working on it, and, you know, will probably be some third-party components that may never be updated for Apple Silicon, stuff like Rewire. So, so we're just kind of getting all that figured out. Okay, so you see in the inspector, within the instrument drop down, there's a light blue region that contains several buttons. Is there a reason this region is highlighted? Is it more important than something else? All right, so let's come over here to, I'll just jump back to new project here. Okay, so I'm just seeing, so an inspector within the instrument drop down. So I'm not sure if I'm in the right area. There's a blue region that contains several buttons. Is there a reason this region is highlighted? Is it just more important than something else? I'm not sure if it's, you know, maybe if it's like the track color here is blue that you're seeing, but this will allow you to get to the audio if it's this area here. So we see that the colors will kind of match here. So we see this and this. So this could get you to like the MIDI routing and MIDI volume, and this would get you to the audio characteristics. So if you wanted to quickly add, you know, effects, EQs, and, you know, inserts and channel strip, that's kind of just a quick visual highlight so that you can get there quicker with that. So let me know if that's what you're talking about. If not, just let me know if I'm misunderstanding. Okay, so we see I can only find a way to set grid to bars and beats in the Cubase audio editor. What would be nice to have more control than that. So let's go take a look. Okay, so I'm here. Let's say if I switch my master time to, you know, so right now we see bars and beats as our master time. So that's what we see in the sample editor. But if we switch our master time here to, let's say, seconds, we can now come over here and see everything broken down by seconds or by, you know, frame rate. So it really just matters what you have your master time code set to. So if you wanted to see this in like in frames for film work, or if you wanted to see it in samples, so you can get down to 1/192,000th of a second. So kind of the time grid that we see here in the sample editor, as well as the main time grid, it really just kind of depends upon what you have set as the master time. So if you wanted to see more, you know, resolution options, or, you know, something besides the bars and beats, to have more control, just simply switch the master time display. Okay, just reading through comments. Okay, so we see, okay. Question, how to avoid this irritating audio dropouts. My processor keeps going crazy all of a sudden out of the blue. It really kills my production vibe. So, if you're having dropouts, it could be that your processor is maybe getting overutilized. So the first thing I would do is go to your studio menu, to studio setup. Go to your audio, select your audio system here, and try just to raise the buffer size. So, that would be the first thing that I would do. And we could think of this, if we're to kind of make an analogy, think about it as like a factory conveyor belt. And, you had to put 4 items into a box, and every 4 items have to go into a single box, and then another. Or let's say, depending on this, we had to put 32 items in a box, and every box had to have 32. So that is a lot less room for error than putting 64 or 256. So, the lower the latency and or buffer, the higher your computer works. So try raising your buffer size is the first thing, and let me know if you've done that. And there is kind of a whole... if you're on Windows, check out as Jazz Dude indicated, check out the DPC latency checker, as well as the utility that could find, particular components that might be interrupting, kind of what's needed for, real-time performance. Okay, so we see, is it possible to use a logical editor for mixdown if I want to master stems of like 5 songs? I have to export stems again, and it's a lot of work. So if they're all within the same project, you could do that. There's a way to kind of simplify this. So let's say if we have this as project 1, and then we have project 2, project 3. So let's say like if it's a live thing and we had all these different recordings, what you could do is if we come here, we could add a marker track. Okay, so I'm going to set my left and right locators around this particular event, and I'm going to add a marker track. Okay. Excuse me. And what I want to do is I'll select this, hit the letter P, and then we're just going to add a cycle marker. So I'll come here, hit the letter P, add a cycle marker, P. So, if we just do this and create cycle markers for each of these, so now when I go to export, we could choose to export multiple and then by cycle markers. So we could just come right over here, and then we could export multiple projects or multiple songs within the same project just by doing it as cycle markers, and then you could add it to a queue just like that. So if they're all in one particular project, if they're 5 separate projects, the Cubase isn't going to automatically open up a project and then export it. There is an automated process between projects, but if they're all in one project, you could export based on the cycle markers. If your cycle markers are named, you could export using the name of the cycle markers as well. So. Okay, so we see AQ is orange is probably with why some things are orange or different colors. So AQ is orange just because that's automatic quantize, and that is, just showing that it is selected. Like some different things will have different colors if they are active and selected. So if I come over here, we could see that, I could activate the metronome click or count in, but different things will have different color options just to make sure. And I think when something is orange, it's just easier to distinguish because, some people may may accidentally leave that on. So kind of like, why orange is used in like, a road hazard sign, is something that, shouldn't kind of blend in as easily. So I think that's why we see the auto quantize set to orange. All right, well, wonderful to see JVI on our live stream. And we see he was a victim of the different daylight saving times for different continents as well. All right, so I just see a comment. It'd be easier to follow the pointer if it was a bright color and maybe a larger size. So I have it kind of a large size, but let me see if I could figure out how to make it white easily. See if that's helpful, but I did increase it to make it more obvious to people. I know it's not directed just at me, but let me just see. That's awful. All right, so let's see. So it doesn't look like I could, with the Mac, I could see if I could make the Mac OS, make the cursor set to white somehow, but I did increase it, at people's request earlier, a couple months ago. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so we see from JVI, had a brain freeze earlier. I have a track with 10 lanes. I want to keep 3 of the lanes. I usually bounce, but then I lose 2 tracks. What was the way to do this again? All right. Okay, so let's say if, one way of doing this, let's say if we have all of our lanes set up here, if you select the lanes, so say I select all the lanes here and right click, and we could say create tracks from lanes. And then you could just erase the one. So try selecting the lanes, right click, and say create tracks from lanes, and then you could delete the other ones and still keep 3 out of 10 and still have the 1, but still have the 2 if you wanted some variations. Just reading through comments. I think I'm about 25 minutes behind the live questions, trying to catch up. All right, so we see a question from Jeff Sabelski just saying, Greg, when testing many mic chords with Cubase, what is the best way to use a limiter so when we find a bad chord that crackles and blows speakers, it doesn't? So sometimes, you know, people in that situation will just put a limiter like in the inserts for the master section. So say if we go to the main, and they may just put a safety limiter here. And just be able to, you know, set the amount directly here as they're kind of changing. So in that way, it's not necessarily affecting your mix, but you could kind of have your safety limiter. So just go to the main area, and you may have to click on the main, and then click on inserts, and then you could put a limiter there. But you could always, you know, like while you're switching, you could always just dim the signal or mute the signal as well. So, because no one needs to hear, you know, mic cables getting unplugged and stuff. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a recommended way to run 32-bit VSTs in Cubase 11? So if you have to run 32-bit plugins, I think you could still use JBridge. It's not, I wouldn't say it's recommended because it could add to a lot of system instability. But look at JBridge, and I think that could get you, if you have to do it, that would be a way to do it. All right, so we just see a question from Peter K. Says, hope you're doing great. Does Cubase have a touch automation mode similar to Pro Tools? So I don't know Pro Tools at all, but usually when I get this question, it's going to be, all right, so let's say if we have, let me just revert this project here. So usually when we, you know, when people kind of ask this, it's, so say we, you know, we have automation going on. So what a lot of people want to do is just to, so right now we don't have a value for the beginning and the end. So that we have no automation data. So what a lot of people want to do is just to come over here and they will, you know, want to put this into touch mode and say, okay, I just want to bump that up. And then, you know, as they bump up, I'll just rewind this a little bit. We'll start lower here. So let's say as they bump up, you know, they just say, okay, I want to write my automation. And then they want it to go back to where it was previously. But, you know, since there is no point that Cubase has been told to return to, you know, it may, you know, it's going to stay at that particular value. So, you know, what some people will do is just kind of, you know, grab the whole tool here and set the initial value. And now there's a return point. So when we're in touch mode, you could just kind of come right over here, and now you let go. It will go right back to the known value because it's been written. So other methods to do this, once you go into the automation modes here, is you could just choose to, the very first time, just write to end. So if you just say, okay, when we come right over here, you can say write to start and end. And as we do this, we can say, okay, I'm going to touch the fader, and now the automation can be written in when we have like to start and to end turned on. So if I move it, that could put the faders in. But if Cubase doesn't know where to return the values, it makes sense like a physical fader. If you move it up and it doesn't have a point to return to, that at that point, once you have that point, it'll just automatically do the return. So let me know if that's kind of what you're wanting to accomplish. Okay, reading through questions. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. My question for you today would be, how can I make my Alesis V61 MIDI controller control faders, master faders? So, a lot of times we could do this through generic remote control. So, if your Alesis controller does, a lot of them may do Mackie control for if you have like 8 faders. So if it has a Mackie control, you want to click on the plus sign and just come over here, add a Mackie control, and then tell it where to actually go for, your Alesis V61 in and out. So if it's just has like 8 faders, you may just have to set up a generic remote. So if you come over here to studio setup, you could click here, add a generic remote, and then we could see, okay, this will control, we have 8 channels here, and I could come over here, define the inputs and outputs, and if you don't know what MIDI message is being transmitted, simply click on the learn, select this, and move the fader, and that will capture the MIDI message, and then that will control fader 1, fader 2, fader 3. So, and then you could just use your generic remote. If it's just like has 8 faders on it, then you could use that for channels 1 through 8, 9 through 16. So you could just assign those particular messages to the generic remote to have it control mixer volumes. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we see Michael Pierce is on the live stream, so no problem being late. We're glad you can make it. It was great to see you on the Zoom meetup on Friday. All right, so we have a question from Michael Pierce. Random question. What's the point of the generic plugin GUI in the drop-down menu to the top right of a VST, plugins without GUIs or screen readers and such? So sometimes, plugin GUIs can be problematic, especially in high DPI mode. So let's say, just to kind of show this, and let's say if we had a complex plugin. Let me just, all right, so say if we go to our multi-tap delay, all right, so there's lots of parameters here. So sometimes people can't find the parameters in the actual plugin. So at that point, you could switch to kind of a generic editor and be able to kind of see all the parameters which are kind of currently active. So a lot of people use it for that. You know, and sometimes, you know, depending on the high DPI settings, like GUIs from some plugin manufacturers don't show up, or they show up way too big. Like, you know, if you have a MacBook Air, which with a really kind of small screen resolution, that the plugin may extend beyond the screen resolution of the computer, then you could access all the parameters with a generic remote. Okay, so we see how to use the supervision through sidechain to reference mixes using different meters, spectrum bars, spectrum curve, and also used a control room trick, A and B referencing. Okay, so let's come over here, get that set up for Pablo. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Again, if you learn a new tip or trick, make sure that you do hit the like button. Okay, so let's say I have a reference mix here, and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of mess up the reference mix so it's obvious. Okay. And what I want to do is to actually send this to our queue. So I'll send this to Q1 and send its output to no bus. So now when I listen to the audio here, I could listen to the entire mix. But now when I go to Q Mix 1, I'm only hearing this reference. So let's say that's my reference. And this is my mix. So I could toggle between, so I'm just sending this not through the master bus, but I'm sending my reference through the control room headphone so that we could actually monitor without all of the master chain. So when we send our reference, it's not going through our master processing. So that's how you could do that. Now let's say we want to incorporate this with the supervision plugin. So I'll just add a brand new instance of supervision. So, and I want to see like the spectrum bar. All right, and I want to add another spectrum bar here. Okay. So now I want to take my bottom one, and I'm going to go to the settings here, and I want to have this as the sidechain source. And let's come over here, and I think we could have our reference mix. Let me just look for it. Okay, so now we should see if I did it right. So if I wanted to adjust my EQ, right. let me see if I just get this routing here. So yeah, as I adjust this, I get them. Do is try to get that obnoxiously EQ'd sound represented here. So let's take a look. I had this before on a previous live stream, but let me just check. So go here. So I may have to run, let's see if I run 2 instances of supervision. And I'll sidechain this one. See if I just put it here. So I'm not sure why. I thought that I had it where we could do like one sidechain source versus another, but maybe I'm just having a brain cramp on it. But I'll play around with it a little bit, Pablo. See if I get that going for you. Sorry about that. You can see Pablo just saying hi Ryan, so you may hear him in the background. It's kind of a rainy day, so he can't go out as much with his friends today, play outside. chat field just jumped. All right, so I think I'm back to where I was. All right, so we see Steve Thomas, or Tomas. I'm a newbie to Cubase. I just started produce trance only 4 weeks ago, so I got loads to learn. So, yeah, so welcome to the live stream, and we hope to see you on more. And please don't hesitate to ask any questions. All right, so I just see from Andy6358, evening, Greg. I changed my motherboard and CPU recently, and now I get a message every time that I start that my footprint has changed. How would I go about getting rid of it? So usually installing the eLicenser program one more time will kind of take care of that. So try just to, download and reinstall the eLicenser program. All right, so we have a question from Riley Richard. When should we expect Cubase 12? So, as we mentioned before, generally the Steinberg doesn't generally announce like when products are shipping until they're shipping. So I can't really disclose it because, if I was involved in testing, I'd be under a non-disclosure agreement. So. So just see a question, Greg, are the Cubase engineers going to add some matrix sequencer windows to it that Keywalk was trying to implement in Sonar? So I will pass that suggestion along. So I know we always pass on all the questions, so I'll make sure that that gets passed along as a suggestion, but I haven't heard of it. Nothing's been announced with that. Okay, so I see, okay, I can't seem to get 16th notes when using bars and beats. Maybe I missed something. So if you're, and this might be with the sample editor, so let's say if we're looking at our sample editor here and we wanted to see this, we probably just need to, if you set the snap here, so like a lot of times, when we're editing something on a grid, so we could set it to bar, but you could also use the quantize pattern and then just use 16th notes. So often you could, see you could change the grid based on the use quantize. So you may want to give that a quick try and see if that helps with the grid for you. So you see Michael Teams and John Costigan in a discussion about the Lewitt microphones. Yeah, also, and see Michael Teams just mentioning he might be getting an AKG 414. Yeah, check out the Austrian audio stuff too, Michael. I got one and very happy with it. So we see a question from Jeff Zabelski. Are there precautions to consider when importing a music XML file into Dorico Elements from Nuendo? The chords had a few things, length issues I needed to check and edit to repair the lead sheet. So I think that a lot of times, when you're doing, when you're working with music XML, there's always going to be a little bit of tweaking, between different programs. So there's nothing that's like, huge that you have to worry about, but, you'll find maybe different things and, you might have to just kind of tweak just a little bit. So, all right. So we see Cedric is taking off. So thanks for joining us for the live stream. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, when I right click and add a new audio MIDI instrument track, why does it sometimes add it to the very bottom of the project window? So sometimes it depends on, like, if you're adding, let's say, if, it may not add it into a particular, into a folder. So let's say if I come over here and I have everything in a folder and I right click and I say, oh, let's add a instrument track. I'll make this an active project first. That would help. So when we go to add an instrument track, that doesn't go below that, but because it's in a folder, so it may just automatically go there. Sometimes when you're adding particular types of tracks, so let's say like an effects track, you could choose to create inside folder or outside folder. We can think of create outside folder as just being the, we could think of that as just, below selected track. An inside folder would go into the groups folder or the effects folders. So, but it could depend on, like, sometimes if you see it sometimes doing it, sometimes not, like if you have a part selected or a track selected, or if there are tracks within a folder, it may not add it into the folder specifically, but below the folder or towards the bottom. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great discussion. Okay, read through more comments. All right, we see Sable Winters on the live stream. It's great to see you on the Zoom meetup on Friday. All right, we have David Griffiths, who's just landed in southern Spain and logged in. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully you're on a nice vacation. So you see a question from CC just saying, what's your favorite VST if you ever need to smooth out harsh vocal recordings? So, if I had to, depending how complex it was, sometimes just a compressor would be really good. But, if it was something really challenging, I would probably go for the frequency EQ. And then once you get into the frequency EQ, realize that each band could not only have, full EQ capabilities with, linear phase EQ options, but you could also have dynamic EQs. So if you wanted to just apply dynamics on a very kind of narrow frequency range, you could adjust the dynamics just right there. So if you had to be very surgical, I would, and a normal compressor or EQ wasn't fixing it, I would probably go for frequency, because you have 8 bands of EQ, and each of the bands could be set for left or right, mid side on stereo tracks. With independent settings plus the dynamics control in each of the bands if you needed it. But, ideally, if you try to avoid a harsh vocal chain that's recorded, that's always the best choice. So. Okay, reading through comments. All right. Okay, just reading through more comments. So thanks for all the great. Okay, we're still reading through, so. All right, and we have Dennis just joining us. You don't have to worry about being late. So we don't give out tardy slips. So we're just here to teach everyone. Okay, so we see from Sable Winters, Greg, I'm starting to use Cubase for Android on the run. Do you know if it's difficult to import small Cubase projects under 10 tracks? So, I think, there's not a direct import of Cubase to that, but, if you have like a mix down file, you could take take it as an MP3 or WAV file on your phone, and then kind of, work from that and then import those files directly back into Cubase. But you could take a, Cubase's project and import that. All right, so we see a question. Hello, how to pirate Cubase? You go to the Steinberg online shop and then click on shop, and then you get it's a steal for what you get. So. Yeah, so we see Michael Pierce just saying the Austrian audio gear is high in his to buy list. They did a very clever thing, AKG. So the story I heard was it was kind of the AKG development team, and when they got kind of disbanded, they then bought all the machinery from AKG kind of at a fraction of the cost. So it was so. And AKG, I think I'd heard, paid for all their R&D for future products that ended up kind of being Austrian audio products. So. Okay, so we see from Jeff Sabelski, what's the easiest way to use a test mix track in Nuendo to keep the master mix clean of inserts? Okay, so let's just jump back. This is what we're just trying to get going with the project with the frequency EQs. Let me just jump back to that one. Okay, so if you wanted to use like a test mix track, Jeff, maybe like a reference, something that you're trying to kind of get into the ballpark, what I would do is select that particular reference track, go to Q-Sends. You want to make sure that you have a Q-Send activated in the control room. So come over here to the audio connections and control room, and then I just made a Q-Send, just right click, add Q, and I made one, I called it reference. All right, I'm going to delete that and actually add a make it a stereo. All right, so in my control room, I'm going to add Q. Reference. Okay, so you could have the audio file in your project, and instead of sending it to your stereo bus, you want to send it to no bus, and to activate the Q send. So this is my second Q send is reference. So turn that on. So now this track isn't playing back through my master bus with all of its effects on it. So as, let's say, if I wanted to now listen between the two different ones, I could come over here, and this could be a reference, and this could be my mix, just switching the control room tabs. So now this is going through the control room, not going through the master bus. It's not routed there. If I put on a huge insert, so say I put on something horribly obvious like a flanger on my master bus, because everyone needs to do it. Now I go back to my main mix. So this isn't going through the master channel, just through the control room, and you could check your levels and EQs and just use as a reference point. So just see from Michael Teams, just asking if Austrian Audio has a comparable mic to the 414. So I think it's the OC818 is the one. So Check that out, Michael Teams. All right, so Jarlath is logging out, so thanks for joining us. Okay, so we have a question. What is the UV22 HR mastering plugin and how to work with it? So what the UV22 is, and it's often going to be used like in the master bus of a particular project, that's a dithering plugin. So we will see it kind of under the mastering section. And what this allows you to do is to, when you're taking an audio file that's, let's say 24-bit, 48K, and then you want to have the same quality when you go down to maybe a lower resolution format or different sample rate, say for like a 16-bit 44.1 CD. At that point, what dithering does is it kind of allows you to kind of keep the same, the higher resolution sound for lower resolution files. So that's what the UV22 dithering is for, to kind of maintain kind of the sonic integrity with the, at working with lower resolution files. Okay, reading through. See Dan Freeman just saying, I wish I could have made it to Zoom, but it had appointments come up and get missed. So I think it will do the next one. I think it's maybe November 30th or 31st. In the US, it's, I think, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. So look forward to doing that. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we have a question from Randy Lee. Does Cubase and Nuendo look that similar? Thought they were different. So they will look very similar. There will be some things that will have slight interface design changes, but they are, if I opened up Nuendo, I could do a whole thing in Nuendo and most people wouldn't notice. So it's just, they do look very similar, just Nuendo offers additional functionality that's not found in Cubase. So okay, reading through comments. Okay, so we see, is there a way to have individual output stems with different sample rates, bit depths, file types during single mix down? All right, so we'll just kind of show this quickly. So, okay, so we could have each of those different ones in what we call like job queues. So if we do export, so let's say if I wanted to do an export of, I go to my export audio mix down. So let's say I wanted to do stems. I'll just make sure. Okay, so so at this point, sorry, I just have like 100 emails coming in. I could say, okay, on this particular one, let's say I wanted to do 24-bit 48K. So I'll say, okay, let's do 24, 48, and now I need to do all of the channels. I'll just say, okay, we're going to take all my effect channels, all of the instruments, and then I could add that to the queue. At this point, I could say now I need it to be 2496. Then at this point, I could add that to the queue. I need this to be 32-bit, 48K. So say 32-bit, 48K, but I need these to be split channels. Add that to the queue. So now what I could do is just say start queue export, and it would, you know, once I have these different queues set up for the different sample rates and different bit depths and file formats, then I could just start the queue export, and it would do all those different scenarios at once. All right, so we see bring back mixer maps and better outboard control. So, you know, mixer maps you could kind of do using the, so a lot of very complex things will now just have, VST editors, but you can create your own device panels. So, which are very analogous to mixer maps. So if you wanted to come over here to your studio setup, and I think it's not there, sorry, but if we go to studio to your MIDI device manager, so if we wanted to come right over here, we could say, let's open the device, and now we could, add a panel. We could make it inspector size, general size, channel strip size, and then we could, at this point, okay, now we have this on channel 1, and, what do I want to add? Okay, so I have a background. I want it faders, and I want it to have this do MIDI CC or MIDI sysx messages. So you can come over here and still do that. So if you wanted to build your own editors, you can do that and access it directly from device panels or within the mix console as well. So. Okay, so we see what options for parallel compression can be arranged in Cubase. So, there's a number of ways to kind of do this. So let's say, like in this project, I wanted to take like all of my drums and do parallel on them. So we'll come over here, say, okay. So I could take all of my drums here. And let me just check my control room, make sure we're... route it out to the same. Okay. So one easy way of doing it is just kind of select all your sources. And what I want to do is I'm just going to add 2 group tracks. So we'll say, okay, we'll make these stereo. We'll create them outside of the folder. Then I go to my sends here. So I'll just say I'm going to select all my drum tracks. Go to the sends. I will turn on quick link. Let's send it all to group 1. And let's send it all to group 2 in the second one. So turn that on. And I'll just send these to absolute value. So now we've routed these tracks to our 2 groups. And what I want to do on one of the groups is just come over here and let's apply just like a heavy compression. So right now we're sending the drums to this group. And we're sending it to this group, and this group has the really heavy compression. So this way we can kind of get the dynamics with just that group, and I can kind of get the punch of the compression by dialing this group in. And you could just find that sweet spot. So without that, without the parallel compressed track. So that's how you could do parallel compression quite easily. See, Michael Pierce is reminding us that the proper way to say an AKG 414 is in England is to call it a 414. So cultural audio things. Okay, so we have a question from Scott L. Wilson. What is the benefit to real-time mixdown versus offline? So offline, you know, it used to be that people would do, you know, if you're utilizing any outward gear, like external instruments or external processing, it has to be done offline. There's no sonic difference between them. So if you're actually, you know, as you're working, you know, and you do an offline and, you know, and I guess the real time mixdown is, you know, often going to be faster than, you know, than the actual playback of the project. And we would have, you know, people using other programs to get crazy if they did like an hour-long TV show and they would export. You know, in other programs, they would have to do it and it would take the length of the project and would do it in 1 hour. And, you know, if you used a program like Cubase, it might be 5 minutes. So, you know, if you're getting paid by the hour, I guess, you know, offline, you know, if you're doing like kind of real time, is good, you know, but if you want to get your work done faster, you know, there's no sonic degradation doing kind of real time versus offline. So. See, Pablo is appreciating Google Translator, so. It's great if English isn't your native language. I appreciate it when I travel, especially to Japan, and I have all those funny letters, so. All right, great to see Brian Sawyer on the live stream, and sorry to hear about your family situation, but hopefully we'll catch you on the next Zoom meetup. But glad you could join us, and you'll be in our thoughts in your time of suffering there. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. Okay, so we see a question from Jeff Sabelski. Greg, I exported to an MP3 and a WAV. Both sounded same volume, but when uploading the same WAV file to SoundCloud, it was half the volume of the MP3 uploaded. Any insight as to that effect? Thanks. So sometimes, depending on, So, it should, I don't think that there's anything in Cubase that would make it sound different in SoundCloud unless there was perhaps, because I think SoundCloud will play kind of like a full resolution file, which is why people uploaded there. But, maybe somehow they obviously all have some kind of algorithm to stream the audio online. So I'm not sure if SoundCloud is just playing the full resolution file or if it's maybe has something in its playback engine. Sometimes, like I read the comment earlier, I think it was from John Costigan saying, like he sent something that was kind of the wrong levels to, to sound, to a radio station, and, they had problems, with it, didn't translate as well. So, there could be some different playback algorithms that they're using. So, but if you could let us know kind of what level it was as well. And sometimes maybe, like they decode the MP3 differently than for playback than they do a WAV file. Okay, so we learned it's 414 in Spain as well, so it's not just an American-European thing. All right, as Pablo has confirmed. So we see Michael Pierce just says he mentions that he did have a producer that was worried about the comparison between off and online bouncing, and is with another program. Apparently they didn't null at minus 120 dB or something. So some of the other programs used to have to do everything in real time because it physically ran through the DSP. But since things have gone native, so there's a lot of almost mystique about that it can't be as good because because other programs didn't allow you to do that because physically the audio had to be processed through the DSP, and since that changed, then people's opinions changed on that, interestingly enough. So yeah, we see John Costigan mentioning, I tried mixing down Handel's Messiah in another program in a real-time mixdown. It only took 3 hours. So, yeah. The worst part of that, John, is having to play Handel's Messiah, which I did for many, many Christmases in college. So it's like, oh, another Messiah gig. So. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on the live stream. Glad he could sneak in to say hi. All right, so I think I'm almost caught up with the questions. I know we had some that were sent in, so let's go ahead and get to those. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. All right, let me go over to my Word document here. Oh, sorry about that. All right. Okay, so we had a question: how to randomize MIDI events using the logical editor. Okay, so let me just jump over to. All right, so I'll just come over here and let's talk about like some randomness. And usually like hi-hats are good for this. So let me just. Okay, so let's say I'll just put in some hi-hats. Okay, so let's say as we're listening to our hi-hats, you realize that this could be a bit extra annoying and sound incredibly machine-like when we have our different hi-hats not really changing. So if we wanted to randomize different things, you know, we could come to the logical editor. So what we want to do is to choose to transform, and we're going to say type is equal to note, or we could actually just come here and say value 2. And then what we want to do is to adjust, you know, let's just choose note here, and we want to take value 2, so which will be velocity, and we want to set to relative random values between, let's say, 80 and 120. So what this will do is it will take the velocity of the hi-hats, and instead of it being all fixed at 100, I could come over here and let me just. I'll just set random values. I'll try this again. Sorry about that. So now as I play, we could just have that automatically just go between the different random values, and you could just do this. And let's say I want this between 60 and 120. So now So again, just say transform. You want to say type is equal to note value 2. We want to set to random values between 60 and 120. So being that that was totally fixed, we could just make that more interesting. Now let's say we want to adjust the position, and we can say set to random values, and we'll just say between minus 20 and 20. So now instead of it being perfectly straight on the grid, you could just adjust the position as well. Or if you wanted to set to random pitches. So those are a couple of things that you could do to just kind of make MIDI values random and a little more musical, especially if something's kind of programmed in and you just don't want, you know, the hi-hats can be a dead giveaway for a lot of programmed drums if they're all, you know, much louder. So, all right, so I think we covered the next question I had from Lennox already. All right, so question. In Cubase, I need to copy the clip gain lines from one event track to another track. These are pre-fade lines from the pencil tool used directly in an event, not automation lines. Thanks for all your knowledge you spread on the live streams. All right, so let's take a look at this. So I think this is like if we look at like our pencil tool and we draw volume on the events here. So let's say if we need to apply that curve, and generally this is part of the event itself, but I'm going to, let's just copy this. I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key. So if we do that, I have my curve here, but it's still the same event. So if I wanted a different audio file to play, what I could do is I will just come over here, and since I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'll replace only this one. So now I could take that same curve that we had here for the kind of pre-fader gain and copy it, and then replace the event on top of it. And then the clip gains that we've drawn in will be maintained. So if you kind of copy it first and then take that file and drag it on, then you should be able to maintain the curve without, but it doesn't allow you to necessarily copy that particular curve. So give that a try, Tiago. All right, and Soren, I kind of replied via email, and we can get some more information, but we got that going already. Okay, let me go to another project here for this next question. Okay, so the question is, I recorded some guitar. I'm sorry, let's see. I edited audio using Audio Warp twice now, and after I bounce and replace the events, my transients have moved slightly. Before I bounced, I'm moving my transients so that the middle of their peaks are centered on a grid as best as I could tell. Attached is a recording showing the transient peaks are centered to the grid for 2 transients, and after bouncing and replacing events, the first transient is shifted forward slightly, and the next transient is shifted back slightly. Some transients seem to not have moved. The first time I did this, I had to re-edit almost every transient. For this audio event, most transients didn't move. I'm using the Elastic Pro format pitch. Should this be happening? So one thing that I would check, so if you've kind of gone through and, you know, let's say if we're here and we have our hit points and we created warp markers, and now we've done free warping, you know, so let's say if I'm here and I have this set to you know, to free warp where I could move kind of my different parts. What you may have to do is just go to your process and choose to flatten. And what that'll do is that will kind of render the particular audio file. So it could be that, you know, you might have to render that particular audio file. Now, something else to worry about is when we go to the hit points, you know, we could come over here and, you know, we could choose to align. So let's say if we just find our hit points here, we adjust our threshold accordingly. You know, we could choose to have these align only to, like, you know, the quarter notes. So make sure that in beats that you have this set to all as well. And that could be causing some of the problems that you're running into as well. So I would try those two things and see if that works. Okay, another question. I recorded some guitar in Cubase and let the program sit for a while I used other apps. Then I was sitting at my desk doing non-computer stuff and noticed that the fan for my mobile desktop was going. Cubase shouldn't have been doing anything I know of. I looked over and saw Cubase was peaking its processing. I closed the programs I don't need open. Cubase continued peaking. And he sent a video along with this. I saved a project, then selected quit, and it prompted me to save it, which I thought was strange. It then took forever to actually quit. I used to have this issue with my Alienware all the time, but this custom mobile desktop hasn't been doing this till now. Rebooting Cubase didn't resolve this issue. I had to reboot the computer. So a lot of times what that kind of sounds like, you know, I would check, you know, through DPC latency monitor and make sure that there's nothing else that's being triggered. Sometimes, you know, being in Cubase, and then if you're doing like general computer stuff that may, and you're doing, you know, using your Wi-Fi network, that may cause a lot of interrupts and could cause problems. It also sounds like, you know, sometimes plugins could develop like a memory leak. So the longer that they're open, the more memory and processing they could kind of take, you know, almost kind of like a parasite growing in for your memory. You know, if you could think of that, just kind of, you know, gradually filling up all of your memory. So make sure that you don't, you know, see if you eliminate third-party plugins, if you still have the same situation. But it kind of sounds like a classic memory leak, especially when Cubase takes a long time to close. That's often indicative that the plugin itself isn't releasing memory. So that would kind of lead me to think it was probably a plugin that's causing that. Okay, so we just got a question on lyrics. So it says, and they attached two pictures. It says, but basically I've gone through all the YouTube videos and read the manual. It says I need to add the word that over the note D, which is tied from the previous measure, into beat 2 as well. The score editor correctly notated what was played, but it won't allow for editing it over the tied note. In one attempt, I can't recall what it did. It cut the tie from measure 9 to 10 and accepted the lyric, but it added layout in blue underneath and a vertical line going through it. The tie is missing from bar 9 to 10, which should remain. How do I accomplish adding words over ties? Thanks in advance. Greatly appreciated. So let me jump back to my other project where I had something kind of set up for this. Okay, so let's look at it in the score editor. All right, so it's kind of like this type of situation where we wanted to put lyrics in, like on this note that was tied across measures. So I didn't have any problems coming to here. So let's say if I just go to lyrics and I start typing in lyrics, and then just hit the tab key, that would take me to the next lyric page. So, you know, just selecting it, you know, maybe the note before, and, you know, but just putting it here, I didn't have any problems, just kind of setting the lyric directly to a tied note across the measures. Make sure that also in your, you know, because you could have different layout layers. So make sure that you have, you know, like you have layout layer 1, which would be like, okay, you know, this is just going to be like, you know, for the score. You could have, you know, this layer, the project layer, which will be for like the key signature. So make sure that like these particular layers are active. So I think I had all of these active as I did this, like this. But if you had the lyric somewhere else or the text somewhere else and you want it, so you can see that as I would grab my little hand tool, that we could move the, you know, move the note and the lyric is tied with it, but you could move the lyric independently if it's entered somewhere else. But check your different layout layers here, you know, and see if you know, if all of these are enabled, if you still see the word layout. But it didn't seem to be any problem just kind of tabbing and typing in the lyrics to have it appear across a note that's tied into a different measure. Okay, and this is kind of in response to a question we had, excuse me, in the previous live stream about how to in the control room. And let me just jump to a different project here quickly. You know, setting up the so it says, I was really hoping to keep working on this control room, but had to step away. Just finished a couple hours trying to get the control room to work as I think it should. Could be I don't understand the concept correctly, but but I don't think that's the case. I'm closer than I was. I think my issue was having to create a monitor instead of a cue in the control room. Once I changed that, I got the right click options. So I think that this was kind of getting to the point where if we had different cue mixes, and if you only have one cue mix, you know, and we wanted to set up the cue mix for the person. So when we utilize the control room, and we do this in the studio menu and audio connections, we want to have your monitor set up here, you know, and it seems counterintuitive at first, but have the stereo out defined, but choose not connected. Once we have that, we can come over here to our control room and add a monitor, and that's where we tell Cubase where to send the audio out. So once we have our audio connection here, we could now also in the audio connections window add a reference. So let's say we want this to be, so I could right click and we'll add a cue. So we'll call this, you know, guitar 2, and we can have up to 4 independent cue mixes. All right, so once we have this, now, and I think the genesis of this question was, you know, when you get all cues, like, you know, maybe we were only seeing one cue and not all cues. So if I go to my guitar cue, I could right click and we could, you know, activate and use the current mix levels and use the current pan levels here on the, you know, and what this would do, like if we were in our large screen mix console and we had the cues activated in the racks, if we right click, you won't see all cues until there are multiple cues defined in the control room. But we could come over here and say, let's activate the cue sends. So we'll do that. And what I want to do now is, and you just kind of right click here, and then we can say use the current mix settings. Okay. So I'm going to select all of the tracks here first. So make sure that those tracks are selected. Now we're going to activate the cues for all the selected tracks. We're going to use the current mix settings. And what that does is copy the mix settings from here and map those to the different cue mixes. And I want to use the current pan settings. So now the cue mix, the person will hear the same thing that's going on in a mixer. But when, if the guitarist wants to hear more guitar, we could now deactivate the quick link and we could customize the amount of guitar that's being fed into the guitarist headphone mix. So make sure that when you right click, so as you adjust here, so in QMix, we're sending more guitar into QMix 3. We could send less bass or more bass into QMix 3. So if this is our guitarist headphone mix, we could, adjust accordingly for each of the different sources here. And also with the pan settings. So, it's also, like when you hear it in both ears at this point, just make sure that you are, and you have kind of the pan options directly here for the cue mixes, which can be independent of the actual files here. So give that a shot and let me know how it works out. Okay, and then we had kind of some more discussion on using kind of a Behringer X-Touch 1 with Wavelab. So let me just open that up. Okay. All right, so we have, and I think that this is kind of set up as a like a 4-star arrow with a button in the middle. So it says, and trying to get this to function from like a Mackie control protocol. So it says the arrow keys are set up as follows: up arrows, a cursor up selects previous track, / zoom in vertically, down arrow, sorry, and that's C#6, cursor down, select next track, zoom out vertically, left arrow, we can see is MIDI note 67, cursor left, select previous, and the right arrow is cursor right, and that's D#6. And the button in the middle, E6, toggles between how Cubase Wavelab should interpret those arrow keys. So when you do this in Cubase, see, so if the controller itself isn't transmitting multiple messages, so if you have like the button in the center, and we'll come to 4 compass points, north, south, east, west, if those don't transmit different values, a lot of controllers, and you could check this if you go to Cubase and set up, we'll add just a MIDI track and go to the MIDI monitor. So it sounds like you may have done this already, but make sure that you have, so we go to the MIDI inserts, and let's get to the MIDI monitors. I see that you have the MIDI the MIDI notes. So so you have C6, C#6, probably D6, D sharp 6, and E6 is the button in the middle of the toggle. So often a lot of controllers can be set up to function as, you know, they're going to transmit MIDI messages, and you hit a button that may transmit different MIDI messages to switch between two different modes. So if you could check, and I think this is from Sven, if you could check that when you hit E6, the other buttons change functions between like next and previous, and zoom in vertically and zoom in horizontally. Because Wavelab can only really, you know, choose to zoom when we come over here to our remote control settings. You know, it's not that, you know, how Cubase or Wavelab interprets those MIDI notes. Because if those MIDI notes are, when we come over here to shortcuts, you know, if it's the same MIDI note, you know, the program doesn't, you know, can't differentiate if it's transmitting between the two different notes, because the E6 doesn't toggle, you know, isn't a function between zoom and navigation. So usually in many controllers, when you hit the button to toggle between like an A and B setting, what it does is when you toggle, the north, south, east, west buttons will transmit different MIDI messages, and that's pretty common in MIDI controllers. So if that's the case, so after you hit E6, if you hit the north, south, east, west buttons and they're transmitting something besides C, C sharp, D, and D sharp 6, then you need to assign those. But there's nothing necessarily in the program that differentiates that. So see if when you hit the E6 and you hit the other buttons, if it transmits different MIDI messages. If not, then the controller itself is only transmitting those 5 messages, and we can't get, you're only transmitting like for the 4 points of the compass. In that it's only transmitting 4 messages, and we would need 8 messages to switch between those. All right. And we say, you know, it works fine in Cubase Pro. So with this, you know, again, within the Mackie protocol, it's doing that, but we're not necessarily using the Mackie protocol inside of Wavelab. All right, and we just also had kind of, and we talked about this on the previous live streams, like when we go to edit, we can see that we'll have, so let me just... Right, and about a mode for activating kind of the jog wheel. So, you know, when we come here, we could activate, you know, the jog and shuttle shortcut. So now, you know, when we activate this, we can see that it's going to put this into kind of the playback mode here. So when we activate this, you know, there's the function that you could activate to put it into jog wheel. Now the controller, so it says when you press the scrub button on the X touch, this lights up. The scrub and play button on the X touch 1, but no playback is initiated, and activates the activate jog mode, remote devices, global transport Wavelab. So when you hit the scrub button, it puts it into scrub mode. So now, like if I play, so, but now I activate that. When you activate that button, it doesn't necessarily start, you know, the play's not initiating the transport. Kind of the cursor as you work with it is doing this. Now, many controllers will, as you increase the speed, will send different amounts of a message to increase and decrease the speed as opposed to just going forward or backward. So if you have like the Yamaha Nuage, and it doesn't, you know, like in Nuendo and Cubase, as you do that scrub, it's transmitting multiple values to speed up and slow down so that you have a really effective jog wheel. Now, under the Mackie control protocol, so we see that it does remain lit. So, but moving that knob, it just transmits, you know, to, I think you had indicated that it transmits MIDI CC 60. And when you move to the right, it controls it as, so it'll be CC, let me see, I think it's in the description here. So it says, you're correct that we have discussed it before when that was the speed issue with the shuttling in Cubase Pro. Wavelab doesn't respond to the wheel at all. The wheel sends controller 60 with a value of 1 at right turn forward shuttling and controller 60 with a value 65 at left turn rewind shuttling, but both on MIDI channel 1. So I don't think that Wavelab, you know, because usually when people are doing this type of scrubbing, most people aren't, you know, the controller itself, since it's not transmitting multiple values, you know, there's no real way of Wavelab. I mean, do you want it to play this fast or do you want to play super fast? You know, your controller isn't capable of transmitting multiple messages. So, and most controllers aren't, especially over MIDI. So that's why I haven't found that particular way to adjust that in Cubase. We could actually have, you know, shuttle play as a key command. This, I haven't found an equivalent in Wavelab. I mean, we'll still search and I will send some additional emails on it. But if we come to Cubase, there's, you know, particular functions for shuttle play, you know, where you can do it half or 1/4, 1/8, or up to, you know, 8 times the speed. And you can set up keyboard shortcuts for that. But I don't think Wavelab has that, as most people would tend to do the very precise editing solely on, you know, when we're in scrub mode, just directly from the cursor, as opposed to using kind of a Mackie control knob for that. So sorry about that, Sven. All right, let me jump back to our live questions. Thanks for all the great questions. We hope that everyone is continuing to learn new stuff. All right, let me go back to find my chat here. Trying to find my spot where I was. Sorry about that. Okay, so I think I'm back where I was. All right, so we just see, hello again. Can you change the resolution in Cubase 10? So if it's, I'm not sure if it's like a display resolution or audio resolution, but if it's, sorry, let me just get out of Wavelab here real quick. So if it is dealing with like the audio engine processing, if you go to the audio system, you could change the processing precision from 32-bit to 64-bit. If you wanted to change like what audio files are being recorded, if you go to the project menu to project setup, you could adjust the resolution here of the file. So you can say, okay, I want this sample rate and this bit depth. If you're talking about kind of the display resolution, that's really set by your computer's operating system and your video system. So if you go like on Mac OS, for instance, to your displays, then you're able to adjust kind of screen resolution there, and Cubase will follow your particular resolutions. If you are on Windows and doing high DPI, you could go to Preferences under General, and then you could see if you're running at a high DPI, you could also run just a custom scale for Cubase within the high DPI as well. So hopefully one of those will answer the question. So I'm not sure if it's audio resolution or display resolution. See, it's interesting reading different people's Messiah stories. So it's always an interesting piece for musicians to be involved with. All right. All right, so we see from Howard D Music, any more tips on avoiding audio dropouts in Cubase because of processor overload? If you already have set the buffer size as big as possible and even used bounce in place to lower CPU usage, try what you would do is I would find out if there's a particular track that's causing your problem. So, and it could be that you go to your audio performance meter. So say you go to your audio performance meter and you say, oh, is this track causing it? And right click and choose to disable the track and see if that makes a difference. And, do 5 tracks at a time and see if you can see one that's just, killing your CPU, and, see if it's like one track, maybe it's one plugin that's just causing the problems, but, select several tracks here. And try just to disable those tracks, and that will free up the memory and CPU cycles, and see if you notice a difference. And if it's not a big difference, do it to the next 5 and just kind of keep doing that. Cubase isn't necessarily, it's something that's causing your CPU to work hard, so you could find it pretty easily, I think. See, Gareth is teasing me for how I say velocity. So it seems people seem to get a kick out of it, but maybe it's European if I say velocity or something like that. All right, so we see from Michael Pierce, can we get a Bernard Purdie quantize setting in Cubase? I need that shuffle. You could always just take a particular audio file, take a Bernard Purdie loop, just an audio file that he played on, and he's done sample CDs, I think, or, take a classic track. What you can do is, let's say, So let's say that's a bit Bernard-esque. So, you know, take that particular loop, and really all you had to do is come right over here. You can find your hit points and create groove, and then that could be your Bernard Purdy preset right there, and you could do that on any other MIDI part. So it's pretty easy to do. For MIDI parts, you may also want to just check out a really easy way of adding great swing to things, and you know, is if you go to the Quantizer plugin, and at this point you'll see a swing value. Just set that to 100%, and that kind of gets people the swing feel that they often want. But if there's a particular Bernard Purdy feel you want, just, you know, do an analysis and drag and drop, and then you could just save it as a preset. So just see a question from Jan. Does Greg use master bus group for all tracks, or is stereo out enough? I generally use stereo outs. I know many of my composer friends will have like a premix group, and that way they could print things in real time. So if they wanted to capture multiple sources and kind of print to make stems, so that they could have tracks that are going into stems, into stems, into stems, and they could kind of create all their deliverables. But it's a little less needed since, you know, Steinberg improved the export options. So I tend not to, but I see the use of it for people that sometimes with, you know, very complex routing for composers with, you know, 3,000 tracks, that everything will go to kind of like a pre-master group. But I tend not to work that way, but the projects I work on aren't at that level of complexity. Let's see other people's discussions on that. See, Gareth is just conveying that it just seems dirty these days to have inserts on the stereo out. So I think it's fine. It kind of gets you to the same ending. So. See, Gareth likes the lyrics I typed in, and yes, you could steal them, but you just had to give me a writing credit. So. All right, so Sergo Casimir is saying, I think I'm going to a new level. I finally understand why a logical editor. So that's good. Once you start building your own logical editor presets, you feel like a real power user of Cubase. All right, so just see, Greg, I constantly have audio in synced folders that get out of sync as I work. On Windows 10, Cubase 11. Does anyone have this issue? So let's say, so I'm not sure if it's in group editing mode that you're in. So when you say synced folders, you know, so we could kind of keep everything, you know, so if group editing is turned on, if that's what you're referring to, when you say synced folders, or I'm not sure if it's like a visual representation of the folder. Maybe if you could specify, I know we're towards the end, I may not catch it. Okay. Just reading through some more comments, see how we're doing on time. Okay, about 8 minutes. All right, so we just see, is there another chat layer? I don't see questions Greg is addressing being asked here. So generally, I will be behind on the questions, so we try to catch up over time. All right, so we see Mandy Lane on the live stream. Thanks for joining. All right, we see David M has made a live stream, so he's usually not here on Tuesdays, so we're glad you could join us. So we just see a question from CC saying, the only thing I wish Cubase had was basic, you know, better basic video editing capabilities. So, you know, you can do like cutting, but, you know, it's not going to be our area of expertise. And there's a lot of tools to do that. And we really kind of concentrate on, you know, audio and MIDI for, you know, to video. So I wouldn't anticipate, you know, adding dissolves and color correction and stuff like that. All right, great to see Marcus Gomez online. All right, so I just see, I always wondered if there's a way to record the scrub function, Cubase DJ scratch mode engaged. So, you know, you can do with a plugin. So if you like one of the included plugins, you'll see it under the other category called Loop Mash FX. So if you want to do like kind of DJ type scratching. So as you're kind of playing along here, be good. And I've just destroyed this song. I'll revert it quickly and just show this. So say as we're So you can just go to Loop Mash FX and just kind of come over here and so if you want to do stuff like that, you could get a lot of great stuff with the Loop Mash FX. Okay, just reading through comments here, sorry. Okay, so we see question, does Steinberg sell MIDI keyboards? So we don't have a Steinberg controller, but you know, there's obviously lots of Yamaha keyboards that work amazingly well, and we're part of the Yamaha family. So. Okay, so we see from David M, used Apache and SX in Cubase 11 yesterday. I had no presets. I felt sure I had some in the previous version. If mine are missing, is there any way to get them installed? Thanks. So if you had them on the previous version, you could probably just go over here to, let's say, into the, yeah, if you're on the Windows platform, you could go here to the Start Globe or whatever it's called now, and go to all programs to Cubase 11, and then instead of launching the Cubase 11, you would go to the user application data folder or user settings on the Mac. It's going to be found under library, and then under preferences. Then we'll see Cubase 11, and then I think that there will be a presets folder. And then you'll just see them in here. And if you don't have them, just let me know, and I'd be happy to email them to you and tell you where to put them. You could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so I think we're just about out of time. I want to thank everyone for the great questions. We'll see everyone on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern, so it's the same time as today, so it might be an hour different for Fridays like today was. But I want to thank everyone for the great questions, and everyone stay safe and healthy, and we'll see everyone on Friday.